Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. Um, my name's Michael Renwick. With Steve Reed, we coach here Adult Ed and welcome you all to the Adult Ed Kickoff. We've got a pretty straightforward program. We're going to talk a little bit about the different offerings, the different Sunday schools, the travel programs, and things like that. But I wanted to start off with, there's a book by a gentleman named Tony Garcia, who is a lifetime educator, a lifetime coach, and through the encouragement of his students and what he used to just throw up on whiteboards in his classroom, he is now a published author of 4 different books. And the way he writes just to me strikes home. So I'm going to ask that we just listen a little bit, listen for the spirit in the following words. I did not know I was strong until I stopped to help another stand. I did not know I was home until I allowed another to seek refuge in my arms. I did not know I was wealthy until I let another know how valuable they were to me. And I did not know I was a light until I sat unafraid in another's darkness. I did not know I was a mirror until I showed another their beauty reflected in my eyes. And I didn't know I was a flame until I handed the torch over to another. I did not know I was gifted until I gave my love to another, and I did not know who I was to become until I unknowingly permitted another to see all I am meant to be. The goal of Adult Ed in this church has been blessed by great leadership. And although it may be a little bit different, I wanted to ask the group for something. We, for the past years, have been blessed with the leadership in Adult Ed by Guy Griffith. Okay, one of the responsibilities of Adult Ed Committee is to always look forward. And as we look forward and we see Guy starting to pull back his role a little bit, which he has certainly earned, I want us just to take a minute and just give Guy a round of applause of thanks, and maybe someone. Thank you. Adult Ed Committee continues to grow in its role and continues to grow in the ask of it. With that said, I want to start off with an invitation. And that is, if there is anybody who's interested in joining Adult Ed Committee, our first meeting this year will be September 23rd. It will be published. It's here in the church. We would love for you to join the committee. The role of the committee, again, has been asked, and there's been conversations with Donovan, and we're trying to get our head around that horizon conversation. So we're asking people, typically Adult Ed Committee is made up of leaders of the classes and a couple of people who weren't fast enough to get out of the room and were asked to chair it. And we're looking at a little bit of a restructure. Those class leaders will continue to be an important part of that committee, but sometimes those class leaders just want to be class leaders because they also have to be mom and dad at home, and they also have a job, and that's more than enough to ask of. So we're looking for people to join the committee that will help us start to structure a plan to how do we look at the horizon? How do we capture all of these blessings that make up Adult Ed? How did we become a church that can draw in people to come to speak to us and speak to our hearts and ask us those wonderful, challenging questions? People like AJ Levine, who will be here the last 2 weeks, 2 Sundays of September. The ability to reach out to someone like AJ and ask her to come talk to us about how a Jewish family and a Christian family consume the same piece of scripture is a real blessing. It is a wonderful time in this day and age to be able to listen to how 2 different groups of people, 2 different faiths can come together and look at the same words and understand where we're all coming from. So the invitation is there. Another quick announcement is adulted@nashvillewpc.org is an email you can email now. If you have a book suggestion, if you have a question, if you have a ask, if some idiot said something in a class, leading a class, and you just didn't agree with me, you can email adulted@nashvillewpc.org. So with that, what I want to do is I'm going to go through real quickly, and then I'm going to start turning it over to people that have come to be part of our family at Westminster, like Will, like Ashley, like Jesse, that have helped guide and are going to continue to help this church to talk about their bits and pieces that they cover. Every Sunday morning, we have covenant class. They are typically here in Fellowship Hall. Usually it's Guy Griffith leading, coming up. Guys, classes, Yolanda Pierce will be here looking at African American religion life. Brendan Breed, assistant professor of Old Testament from Columbia Theological Seminary will be here. And then, of course, I mentioned before, September 22nd and 29th, AJ Levine will be here. We have Faith and Fellowship, which is the class that for some reason Donna Schwaber keeps asking Steve Reed and I to come back and teach in. We right now are in the process of, we simply pick one of the three readings from the lectionary for that week. And then we proceed to go deeper into it and start to ask, how do we apply that into a Tuesday? That's typically the way that Steve and I like to approach things. New members, again, it's starting up September 15th. So if you are new to the church, or as my wonderful wife did after going away to college at University of Alabama, decided she needed to go through the new members class, even though she was born and raised in this church, which really sent her mother sideways a little bit. But she also felt like she had just been away and just disconnected from the church a little bit, and she wanted to kind of get back in touch. So if you haven't been through it and you'd like to, reach out to the church office. New members start September 15th. What I want to do next, I'm going to ask Steve Reed to come up and talk a little bit, because I always like the balance between Steve and I, because he knows a lot of things and I know very little. So I get to bounce the very little that I think I know off him, and I get to watch his reaction. And sometimes he thinks I may be close to somewhere having a point, and other times he just shakes his head no and says, no, you're not even close. But it's wonderful because we did a class here a couple summers ago where it was myself, Steve, professor at Belmont, Guy Griffith, minister. And it was the same scripture, and we all talked about how we all approach it. If I heard it from the first time from the pulpit, what would it say to me? What does it say to Steve from an education point of view, theologically? And what does it say to Guy as a minister if he's the one at the pulpit saying it? So it's a nice balance. It's a way to discover the word. So I'm going to ask Steve to take a few minutes here, because I asked him a simple question. I said, why is education important in our faith? So with that.
Good morning, friends. So I believe it was 2018, my wife and I were just in that kind of mode of, let's just kind of visit. And that's a really healthy thing to do. And we came here and it was just incredible. You all were wonderful. We felt welcome immediately, but our next step was moving into the education side, because not only did that give us a really strong group to lean into, it also was a way to deepen your faith. I've recognized, I think yesterday, I just crossed last week my 41st anniversary of my ordination. It's amazing how life kind of comes quickly, and you just look back and you recognize you just went by a big, important marker. Now, in those 40 plus years, 35 of it now has been in higher education teaching. I've loved being a professor in theology. My focus is particularly in pastoral care and counseling. So at Belmont, I have the unique distinction of being one of the few professors. I actually get to teach new freshmen because I want to. And so we started classes Wednesday, and I can tell you what happens every semester. A whole group comes up and said, I've gone through K-12 in a Christian school, so I think I've got everything down. Good luck with that. I've been studying it 50 years of my life, and I'm still learning. And then I've got those, which actually is probably now our dominant size percentage, is I know nothing about it. And I'm pleased that we can, through education, begin to give people a glimpse of an incredibly beautiful document that we gather around in community. And it always is going to have to be a diverse call. So one of the things that I love about this church, if you look around how we operate inside of education, we have a place for our children, for our young adults. And the adult programs, you've got professors who are routinely invited in to do really important topical work. You have the ability to explore biblical text through different series. You have Sunday school classes. The diversity that we bring is all about bringing the breadth and depth of the gospel into a community. And the more that we can do it, the richer that we are. So my plea is, and I'm probably preaching to the choir because if you're in here now, you're already engaged in education, but keep pushing the limits and inviting others to be a part of what is so important. One of the most gratifying things is I teach PhD students, and that's the really fun group. They've been through the master's, they've been through the undergraduate, now they're really into their training. And the first thing that's always weird to them is I say, stop calling me Dr. Reed and start calling me Stephen, and most of them don't like to do it. But I remind them at this point, they have to become a peer. And they have to become someone who takes that message out. When you learn education and you spread yourself and you dive into it, you automatically become evangelists. You automatically bring people into what it is to live this life. So I really encourage you across the board, whether you're involved or not, to continue this good work, which I will tell you this church does exceptionally well, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Thank you, Steve. One of the folks that have come on board here at Westminster recently is Will Wellman. I'm going to ask Will to come up and talk a little bit about some Sunday school classes that he's going to be doing. And I think it's a really brave thing to take on some of the things he's willing to take on. And you'll hear a little bit why. So Will.
Thanks, Michael. You called yourself an idiot, so I'm not doing that. But I think I might be an idiot as well for leading this class in the fall. So I am going to be leading 2 classes in the fall, and the first one is called Conversations for a Polarized World. So we are heading toward another presidential election, and a church like Westminster is a big tent or a purple church, so we have lots of views here. So I am going to lead a 4-week class that's going to give us an opportunity to have hard conversations, but it's going to be much more about having those from the perspective of our shared faith. We are all Christians here, and so I think we can kind of put our partisanship aside and talk about dialogue, have discussions on these hard conversations, these contentious issues, but doing that from our faith. So we're going to be looking at the Bible alongside newspaper articles. And I'm also going to have a professor from Vanderbilt lead one of our classes to give us tools how to do this dialogue. Her name is Dana Nelson, and she's been studying partisanship for the last 10 years, as well as civic dialogue. How do we have these conversations and move away from just kind of yelling at each other, the empty debates? So that'll be in September. And then in October, I'm starting a series of classes that's going to stretch into the spring, and it's called Back to Basics. There's a lot of people that are new to church. There's a lot of people that are returning to church, and there's a lot of people that just want a refresher or a chance to dig deeper. And so these 3 classes will start in October. The first one is going to be Back to Basics Bible. So we're going to look at the organization, the structure, the different genres, the history, how to read and how to interpret scripture. And that class will reach or start in October and reach into December. And then in the spring, I'll be doing 2 classes. The first one will be Christian belief. So why do we believe the things we believe? Where do those beliefs come from? What's the history of that? How has that belief changed? And how does that integrate into our day-to-day life and the way we live out our faith? And that will start in January. And then halfway through the spring semester, I will teach a class called Christian Living. And that's going to look at discipleship, service, devotion, piety, those kind of things, as well as spiritual formation. And then we'll look as well at worship. Why do we go to worship? We'll kind of give a deeper look into that and how does that play into our own faith formation. So those classes are called Back to Basics, and there's 3 of those. And the one this fall will be Bible. And I think that's it for me for my Sunday school, but I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, who's going to speak about young families. Good. Oh yeah, these are all Sunday school classes. That's September, the Conversations for a Polarized World will run through September, and then October to December will be the Back to Basics. And those are all Sunday school classes.
Hey, morning, everybody. I'm Ashley Higgins. I am the new called associate for young families, called just because I will be ordained mid-September. So after mid-September, I won't be called anymore. I'll just be an associate. This is Molly. I have not worked out of I left my ministry job when Molly was born and have not been worked out of the home since Molly was born. So some of us are still adjusting to that and sticking very close. So here we are. I'm really, really grateful to be here with y'all in this role. I haven't ever been a part of a church that has an associate role primarily for parents. So that feels really important that you kind of understand what that means that Westminster is prioritizing. I just think it says a lot about this community. Sophie has been so fun to get to know and to work with. And the children's ministry is in such good hands with Sophie and her leadership and her wisdom and her experience. So I will overlap quite a bit with Sophie. I obviously have littles as well. And so that's very much a part of my world, but my focus gets to be on parents, which feels like a huge gift. Young families that's not necessarily a descriptor of parents' ages. It's more a description of children's ages. So young families, we're considering birth through elementary school. So I will get to focus on work with parents that obviously bleeds into work with families, kind of birth through elementary school. And I'm so excited about that. I think that just to name in this space, I have a dear friend who's doing some work and he's writing a book about ministry and families. And he has this point in his book that has been really influential for me to think about. He says, oftentimes it's the case that folks come back to church when they have kids. If you've been away for a bit, it's just an easy way to get back into church because you want your kids to be in church. So if that's you, you're in really great company because that's fairly normal. The problem is if folks come back to church because of their kids, then when their kids graduate from high school, you may be likely to leave again if it's your kids that are bringing you back to church. That also makes sense because you've spent years, how many? About what? Kids are 17 when they graduate. You spend about 17 years kind of focused on what do we want our kids to get out of this space. So you pour into the children's ministry, and then you pour into youth ministry, and then you go on the mission trips, and then you're in the parents' Bible study, praying for your kids as they become teenagers and all that, comes with that. And then they graduate and you're tired and you decide to take a break and maybe sort of find that like, hey, brunch is really nice on Sundays. So it feels really important to name that here at Westminster, there is a place for you as a parent to come and learn what it means to be a follower of Jesus in your life, not just for the sake of your children, although that's really, really important, but for the sake of your relationship with the Lord. And then to wonder, how does that relationship that I have, that personal relationship that I have, impact marriage, if that is a part of your family. Impact my kids if that is a part of your family. But you're not coming just because of your kids. And that will sustain you when your kids aren't here anymore. And you can be tired and you don't ever have to volunteer ever again. But there will be a place for you to come and be filled because you are a follower of Jesus. You're not just chaperoning your kid being a follower of Jesus. And so I don't lead there's a young families class, and it's been really fun to get to know some of those leaders. Jake and I, my husband Jake is here. We'll be excited to kind of plug into that group, and also honestly, follow around a lot of you guys because there's a lot of really good stuff happening on Sunday mornings. But I don't lead that group. But I can't wait to get to know that space. Something that I am curious about, and I don't know if we'll incorporate this at some point on Sunday mornings. Be looking for Daddy. Or if this will be in another space. I'll just end with this. My girls, I don't know if any of you that also have children, my girls don't love to sit down with their children's Bibles and read stories. And when my children are profuse readers, they love to read, but whenever I get out a kid's Bible, they're like, oh gosh, which hurts my heart a little bit. But one night we were getting ready for bed, and I said, hey, I'm going to tell you a story, and you tell me if you know this one. And so I started telling them a Bible story. Started telling them the story of Miriam, who's Moses' big sister, and that story from Exodus. And they could not get enough of it. And so I finished. I was like, do you know what that story was? And yes, tell us another one. So I told them another one, and they tell us another one. And I finally got to the point where I realized I have a couple of degrees in theology, and I don't know any more stories to tell you. And that is embarrassing. So I've spent a lot of time wondering what it looks like to work with parents, whether you have degrees or not. I think telling our children Bible stories is really intimidating because we feel like we don't know them, we're not equipped, and we're really going to screw them up if we tell them our version of, Joseph and the Technicolor coat of many colors, So I want to provide a space somewhere, and this is kind of a dream of mine, where we as people who are telling younger people stories and inviting them into their faith, number one, learn the stories for ourselves. Number two, experience what it's like to wonder about stories in scripture. And number two, feel permission to wonder with our kids and be creative and imagine and know that our faith is big enough to wonder and think creatively and imagine, and that you and I are enough of followers of Jesus. We can have permission to tell stories of our faith to our children, even if that means we have to relearn them first. So that's sort of what I'm hoping for our demographic to be about here at Westminster. A bit of that back to basics, which is also something that Donovan is really prioritizing. So I'm really grateful to be here. I think Westminster, it says a lot that Westminster Presbyterian ministers are not cheap hires. And I think it says a lot that Westminster has hired someone to journey with you all as parents. And I hope that I will respond faithfully to that call. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And just to make sure we don't leave anybody off the hook here that supports Westminster, I'd ask Jesse King to stand just really briefly. Jesse is a student at Belmont and has joined us as an intern supporting adult ed. So please take a moment later when we're kind of gathering just to welcome her and tell her how grateful we are to have her support. What I want to kind of bridge over to and start talking about a little bit as we move through these are some of the classes that are not just Sunday morning. Weekly classes. If you have not seen I think it was in the latest newsletter, Donovan talks a lot about connecting to our faith and faith journeys. Go listen, go watch Bill Christie's conversation that he has. It's amazing. Another teacher, another, educated man, wonderful. Bill and Kelly Christie are just a wonderful couple that will show up anytime and help drive a nail and feed a crew out at Habitat and things like that. So go listen to them. I mention that because I don't like talking about my faith journey. I'm not comfortable. I can feel it in my back right now. But take a 32-year-old man who, at that point in his life, is introduced to Westminster. And I can tell you Charlie Brown's Christmas. I can tell you that, I know the characters of the nativity scene, but that's about it. I heard somebody built a boat and there's this Adam and Eve and an apple story, but that was about it at 32 years old. And to walk into this environment and meet wonderful people like Rudy Kalis and Carson Sawyer, Chad Folk was one that I know that we spent some time in men's Bible study and stuff together, and feeling intimidated to engage in the conversation because I didn't know the conversation. They were talking about stories in scripture and I'm trying to read along, trying to figure out what in the world the context is. Forget about Bible sword drills or whatever those were. I never did those in my life. So whatever book you're in, it's going to take me 45 seconds to find it, unless it's one of the 4 gospels. And then I got a shot because I may remember the order. I do know John's last, but after that, I had no shot. So immediately I felt intimidated coming to the conversation around faith. I didn't know what my faith was. I knew there was a really cute girl whose roommate had introduced me to her here on Palm Sunday, and that was enough motivation to show up the next Sunday and the Sunday after and the Sunday after. And then for some reason, she let me stick around for the rest of our lives. And so there was an obligation, mainly because of her parents, that I better be the next Sunday and the next Sunday. Well, that's all wonderful, and that's going to hold up for about a month of Sundays. And then you're going to start seeing that it's not just enough to hear it from the pulpit. You're going to feel an itch that there's got to be more, because there's all these other wonderful things going on. And a wonderful gentleman, Carson Sawyer, will tell you, grab a hammer, come on out. And 31 Habitat houses later, you're still grabbing a hammer and coming on out. But there was still something missing. And that was the conversation about the words that came from the pulpit, because we've always had such strong ministers. And one of the magic, I think, of our ministers are, they don't tell me what I should believe. They tell me what they believe. And in that reflection of their beliefs, I start to see what's possible for me. With that said, the adult ed minister at the time, Trace Hawthorne, for some reason, either I wasn't running fast enough out of a room, and that's a theme in my life, but he said, I want you to do something. I want you to jump off a deep end for me. And I said, I don't like swimming, but okay. And he sent me to Chicago to learn about a series called Disciple. And he wanted me to bring it back, the Disciple program, and lead it in Westminster, starting with Disciple 1. We had 2 classes. And there were some familiar faces in there, and there were some unfamiliar faces in there, but I was pretty sure everybody else of those 12 people gathered in those 2 classes knew more than I did. But we were going to go read the whole Bible in 34 weeks. And we were going to make a covenant to each other to show up every Thursday night and be there and learn together. And it was from there that I started to realize that there are fellow idiots. There are other people who don't know, who just sometimes don't know how the words are touching them, but they know the words from the pulpit are touching them. They know the words at a memorial service touch them. They feel something. Those words that we read mean something and say something. And it was through that you start looking at adult ed. And that's where I think the magic of adult ed has to play. So if you have not engaged in a Disciple Series class, I would highly recommend it. They are no longer a 34-week commitment. They have changed. They have evolved. There is some magic in getting together with some people that you've never met in this church and walking through the same words and starting to have conversations about, what does it mean to you on a Tuesday? What does it mean to you at all? What does it mean to you when you raise your family in this church? I think it was wonderful. I kept smiling and flinching at the same time when Ashley would talk about growing a family in this church. Our 2 daughters have been raised in this church. And we've watched them go through school and harder times, and we've watched them go through Belmont, and now they're adults out there, but there is a wonderful support for parents there. So please get involved in the Disciple series. There are a series of classes that are meeting around Disciple. It's a wonderful place to jump off if you just want to discover the word and have the word discover you. We also have in Magnolia Room, led by Sophie, we have the book study beginning September 8th. This class will be studying the book Woven by Meredith Miller. Mondays, Presbyterian women continue to meet. We're led by Rosemary Verrill. Let Justice Roll Down, Horizon Bible study. Tuesdays, we have a lot of, and this is all in the newsletter, by the way. Great places to find out what's going on is our newsletter, our website. And then if you're ever on a Sunday morning wondering what people are talking about, the screens all around the church have the current Sunday school offerings, what is being discussed, and where to go to join those classes. Okay. Potini's Well on Wednesdays, led by Susan Isaacs and Emery James. Again, disciple classes, and the Westminster Academy is one I wanted to talk about real quickly. Wednesday night, 6:30 to 8 after Wednesday night dinners here, right here in the Overlook Room is Westminster Academy. They are starting, Hank Abbott and Ashley Crabtree are starting Susan Trout presenting James McGribe's The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, which is a wonderful book I've read. That is a great opportunity to invite somebody who's not a member of our church. There's no pressure to join our church. There's no discussion about joining our church. It's a Wednesday night activity where you can come and have a good meal and then go have a good conversation. So I've seen people from the neighborhood coming in. I've seen people have told me about inviting other friends. It's a great place to learn with some friends that maybe are not sitting with you on Sundays. Okay. Let me see here, making sure we're not missing anybody here. There are a lot of fellowship groups that go on. There's a lot of small group hosts that go on. What I would tell you is typically somebody you know is part of one and they'll invite you to join it. If you want to join a small group, we have a small group that Jenny and I participate in and host a lot. I think there are 12 people in our group. I know Steve is part of one. These small group ones typically meet on Sunday evenings, or they tend to schedule their own things. And with that, they'll pick a Bible, a book, something like that, or something to study. And it is, to me, the magic of it is it's much more important that they're gathering than maybe it is what they're studying. There's a lot of strength in what they're studying because they'll pick things that are common interest. But what's more important is the fact that you're kind of part of a group, a smaller group, that you can see each other on Sunday morning and go, hey, yeah, hi. And our community tends to grow because we're a bigger church. So again, host groups are another one. One of the last ones I want to kind of make sure we cover off on is we also do, of course, educational travel. Reformation in the Lowlands is heading off to Amsterdam and a lot of areas around that. Anybody seen the movie Monuments Men? With the art stolen by the Nazis and stuff? If you haven't, go see it on a Sunday afternoon where it's too hot to be outside. Or if you just like George Clooney. Matt Damon's in it too, I know, but it's a fascinating story about how the Nazis were trying to steal the art out of France, especially at the end of the war. And these small group of American and British and French educators, they were art educators, joined the army for the only sake of going and figuring out where this art was being stolen. But one of those big pieces of art that is part of the movie is one of the things that they'll be seeing during that trip in April. So again, if you want to see where faith has walked through history, these are great trips to do. Pardon me? Oh, thank you. Joy in learning. One of the things that you see me kind of struggling with is trying to think of all of the different ways that adult ed touches this church and why it is such an important thing. And one of the other ways that I've seen it come to life through Beth Drake's efforts and the committee that does Joy in Learning. If you've not taken part in a Joy in Learning class, look at what they're doing. You can sit and talk to people that have written songs in the industry, in this community, and talk about how do you write a song. You think you're good in the shower, show up and see if you can write a song. You want to talk about writing a story. Show up, let's see if you can connect the words. You want to learn to paint. If you just like the process of it, you don't have to be good at it. You get to go through it with members and friends of this church for 6 to 8 weeks. And you walk out with a piece of pottery, a painting, something you did together. Maybe that little ditty in the back of your head is now on paper and your kids can laugh at you. But the point is, there is true. I thought it was a cute name when you call it Joy in Learning, until I actually sat down and did a few of the classes. And there is true joy in what the people are doing and what the instructors are giving. It's a great way for, again, I think that is part of education. Education does not just come from a common book. Sometimes it comes from common experiences. Okay. And that idea that someone else is willing to leap off with you, hold hands and jump into that water is kind of special, no matter what ends up on a canvas. So look at there's plenty of publications. One of the biggest goals that Steve and I have had over the past couple of years is to definitely make sure that communication has happened. There are plenty of resources, newsletter, website, always call the church office. Now you can email adulted@nashvillewpc.org. Ask us if you have a question, a complaint, a suggestion, something's missing. There's something you want in your life that you would love to talk to about in the context of a group discussion. We can help. What's fascinating is we've gotten suggestions already. We're already into 2025 spring programming. We've got a full schedule of things coming this fall. Continue to pay attention to the screens, to the newsletters, the website, and such. With that, what I'd like to do is, are there any class leaders here? I know we've got Murdoch McLeod here. I know we've got, if y'all come on up front real quick, just up here real quick. And what I'd like to invite everybody to do is we just kind of end this class with a little bit of fellowship, so to speak. If you'd like to hear about their classes, if you'd like to know more, if you'd like to talk to Steve and I about Faith and Fellowship, I think we're here for Faith and Fellowship as well. Come on up. If you have any questions on the trip, we have flyers. If we have Living the Word publications here, get connected here. And of course, all the books, and we can answer questions about Disciple. Are there any questions about adult ed and how you engage? Are there any questions about the offerings? What I'd like to do, yes. Just show up. Just show up. With one exception, I do think there is a little bit of a mechanism for signing up for Disciple, only because I think those Disciple classes, we try to cap them at 12. You want small group, but you want people that will show. So with the exception of Disciple, thank you very much. Pardon me? I don't know, 12 people walking down the road. No, thank you, Bob. Yes. You do. Yeah, they do have registration for that. But there is a newsletter that comes out on Joy in Learning. All you have to do is ask the church to include you in that blast email. It is a phenomenal program. They put a lot of effort and been very blessed. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yep. Fourth Tuesday of every month, book club, most months. But again, just engage. That's the invitation. You are invited to engage in programs in this church that take you beyond the words coming from the pulpit. Okay, that really do take you deeper into your faith. It certainly has for me, because when that empty itch started scratching after a month of Sundays, it's what has continued to keep me involved in this church for the past 30 years. So with that, I'd just like to kind of end where we started. I can't tell you how blessed we have been through Guy Griffith's leadership and the programs that have been developed and continue to grow in this church. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to serve as adult ed chair with Steve, and we'll continue to look to those horizons and see what else we can do to help serve the church. Did you have a question? I'm sorry. Would you all like to real quickly introduce yourself and what class you lead?
Uh,
I think it's on.
I'm Paul DeWitt. Eli Richards and I co-lead the Murdoch McLeod class. We meet pretty much every Sunday morning in the library. We have a real solid group of usually 9 or 10, sometimes more. And we focus on the gospel lectionary for each given week. And all fall we'll be traveling through the book of Mark. We are going to kick back off big time next Sunday. You don't have to sign up. You can just show up. In fact, some of our, pretty much everybody in our class were just people who happened to show up one Sunday and they liked it and have stayed with us. And I see a number of them here. So if you would like to attend, feel free to just walk in any Sunday and we will get into a very lively discussion of the lectionary text for that day and how it applies to our lives today. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Lee Adams, and Kelly and I, along with Chrissy Self, we co-lead the Young Families Sunday School class. Ashley did such a nice job of explaining what we do, but we meet in the Overlook Room during the Sunday School hour, and we have a variety of speakers, both church members, but also outside speakers, come and speak to our group. And it also provides sort of that rare opportunity for parents with young kids to have fellowship and socialize a little bit. So,
yes, and next week we have fellowship, and Ashley will be joining us. Thank you, Ashley. We're so excited. And then starting the following week, we have a 4-week book series with Tom Wiley. So please show up. You can show up late. I have 3 children here. We're always running in late. A lot of tired eyes in that room, but it's a wonderful place for fellowship, and we would love to see you all there.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy it. It's a little warm out there. If you're doing anything outside, please hydrate. But any questions, just come on up and we'll be glad to take questions. Thank you.